So my talk title this morning is Living Prosperously. Living Prosperously. I don't talk about prosperity as much as a lot of New Thought ministers do. And for one of the reasons, I like to avoid the idea of a prosperity gospel. The notion that spiritual growth is measured by material possessions. Material things are wonderful. They're great to have. But we also need wisdom. We need understanding, because no amount of prosperity can compensate from inner poverty. True wealth always flows from alignment with spirit and not accumulation of things. Ernest Holmes, the founder of our teaching, in the very first page of the textbook, his textbook, he said, "No one has been able ever to count the grains of sand on any beach." He says, "The air around us is vibrant with energy." Why? Why do we live in lack and limitation? That's a good question we need to ask ourselves. And for me, it comes down to a matter of mindset. Mindset. How are we approaching life and prosperity? Oprah Winfrey, she shared a story where she had gone to Africa and she had noticed the kids in this village. They had a discarded bicycle rim, and they were playing to keep the rim rolling with sticks. And she noticed how much fun they were having, how they were enjoying each other. She compared that by visiting a friend who had several kids. And when she asked about the kids, they were all in their private rooms on their computers. And she said, who are really living more fully? Who are more engaged? We seem to be at a point in our culture where we're becoming more isolated. COVID didn't help that by anything. But we're also driven by an underlying fear of not having enough and not having a guarantee that we're going to be taken care of. We live on a treadmill of endless toil and worry, striving to survive instead of thriving in spirit. You know, I've shared this story with you many times. I had a dear friend. I worked with her when I was in D.C. And as a young woman, she had worked at a radio station. Now, first jobs at radio stations used to be very poorly paid. And so she was working out in Iowa. She wasn't getting paid very much. And this was her first job. And she was determined that her first year working, that she would put away $2,000 in savings. She went over her budget, and she came up with a plan. And the plan would allow her to put $2,000 in savings, but it would also mean for that entire year, the only thing she could eat day in and day out was frozen fish sticks. And that's what she did. She put the $2,000 into savings. Now, by the time that I knew her, much, much later, she had had tremendous success. Not only tremendous success, but her parents, her father had been a scientist with NASA. Her mother had been in the educational system. She only had a sister, and so she had their wealth had passed on to her. She had saved and accumulated a great deal. She one time went to a financial analyst advisor, and she showed him all her savings, all her accumulations, and this financial advisor put his pencil down and looked at her, and he said, "You have saved enough." Now, when you have a financial advisor telling you you've saved enough, you've got enough. I happened to call her one day. It was in the middle of the summer. She lives in D.C., which you may not know can get extremely hot. Hotter than St. Augustine. So I called her up and asked her how she's doing. She said, "Well, I'm doing fine." She says, "But you know," she says, "it's so hot in my office." She worked out of her house. She said, "It's so hot up here." She said, I can barely work." And I said, "Well, Lynn, why don't you turn the AC up?" And she says, well, she says, the thermostat's down on the 3rd floor. She says, the electric companies, they advise us to keep it on 78. So my office is probably around 90 degrees. Now, with all that savings, all that investment, all that wealth, she's still eating frozen fish sticks. She hasn't been able to move past. She hasn't been able to accept her source and to rest in that comfort. It's a mindset. It's a mindset to know that we are deserving of Spirit's goodness. We're deserving of abundant life. There is nothing too hard for God, and there is nothing too good for me. And my having good doesn't take away good from anyone else. In fact, it lifts up the whole vibration of gratitude. It helps all of creation. The infinite is everywhere present. Spirit never withholds from any of us. And if we're not living in prosperity and joy and health and peace and supply, then we're blocking it with an old idea or conclusion. And it may be something that was passed along to us unconsciously and we're not even aware of. So it's good and important to look over your past conclusions and ask, well, does this still fit for me? Is this still making sense for me? You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was up close to the Smoky Mountains National Park, right outside of it, actually, in Cherokee. And I'm always amazed and surprised in that area how close together extreme wealth and extreme poverty coexist. Within a couple of miles, you can see a farm that basically is just a junkyard. You know, things are trashed all around, to a $1 million home within a mile or two. Same land, 2 different perspectives. Same material, 2 different ideas. Now, my parents grew up in the Great Depression, and they were fascinated by poverty. They couldn't let the idea go. Somehow, in the middle of the 60s, they had found an old farm family that was still living like it was the 1930s. They didn't have indoor plumbing. They cooked and heated by wood. They had a wood stove that you would sit around. They didn't even have radio. And they would sit around, and what would they talk about? They would talk about how bad things were and how another depression was coming. They were sitting in the middle of the biggest economic boom this nation ever experienced, but they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it. Now, there's nothing holy about being in poverty. It has no virtue of its own. Spirit expresses through joy and beauty and creativity, and yes, prosperity. And I believe the keys to living in prosperity are really, they're simple, though sometimes they ask us to make some courageous choices. If you're in a place of desperation, then you've got to do what it takes to get out of that place of desperation. Now, that can be sometimes, like I said, a courageous act. But Spirit can work through any avenue we open, but we have to first open the door. Emmett Fox said, Spirit always meets us at the point of action. We say, treat and move your feet. Do your prayer work, but you got to get out in the world. You got to make something happen in your world. We act in faith, and then we invite Spirit's abundance to meet us halfway. I had a friend of mine in Atlanta, and her son had left to go to college. And so in Virginia Highlands of Atlanta, which is a very nice neighborhood, she decided to rent out a couple of rooms. Her friends just were horrified. They were convinced she was going to invite in a mass murderer under her roof. They couldn't complain to her enough about it. Well, she went ahead and did it, and she found 2 Egyptian students from Georgia Tech. And they moved in, and those guys immediately adopted her. They didn't let her do one single thing. She couldn't bring in groceries on her own. She couldn't change a light bulb. They adopted her. And then when one of them had married and he brought his wife over to Atlanta, she adopted her as well. And Haba, that was the name of the young girl, she became my friend's daughter that she had always wanted. Now, years later, many years later, I had gone on a business trip. I was away, and I got a call that my friend was in the hospital. She'd had a serious stroke. I couldn't get to her immediately, but just as soon as I can, I made a beeline to where she was in Jacksonville. And when I walked into the room, who was there with her? Not her son, not her husband, but Heba, her adopted Egyptian daughter. This is how prosperity works. We open ourselves up, knowing we are supported and loved by Spirit. We open one small door and Spirit flows in through in ways we can't even imagine. When we live in this poverty mindset, we stew in fear, and fear narrows our vision. It narrows our possibilities. We don't even see the good that's surrounding us. I had another friend in Atlanta, and this guy, he had a business going. His business was he had figured out a way to sell garden stones, a kit to make garden stones. All it took was 50 cents of instant cement, and he was selling them for $15 a kit. He was making money hand over fist. But then all of a sudden, sales dried up, and he realized he wasn't going to be able to support himself anymore. So he started casting around to see if he could pivot, to see if he could come up with some other idea to bring in income. At one point, he had come on a product. He was going to make jelly out of kudzu. If you don't know what kudzu is, it's a vine that will take over anything. Even the cows will not eat kudzu. So he's going to make jelly out of it. He made some for me, and I was kind of like, I wanted to be supportive, but I'm like, not sure there's a market for this. So he didn't get into the jelly business, but what he decided to do was to go back into his original career, which was doing flowers for weddings. And he didn't want to do it. He had moved from that. He didn't want to go back to it. But he decided he would, and to get back in the game, he rented a booth at the annual Wedding Planners Convention of Atlanta. And believe it or not, that's actually a very big to-do in Atlanta. So he had a booth. He was going to market his services. The Friday night, when they get the convention hall set up, he pulled up in his van. Before he could get out and get his supplies out, he looked in the back and he noticed that there was an older couple in a large Cadillac, and they were struggling to get supplies out of their trunk. And he thought to a moment, well, I'll help them out. So he locked his van. He went and he helped the 2 out. He helped them get to their right place, locate where they needed to be. He helped them set it up. Turned out the woman was president of the Wedding Planners Association of Atlanta, and she made it her business that every single member she had went by his booth and visited him. After that weekend, he was back on track to bringing money in. Now, I tell this story because if it had been me, I would have missed that opportunity. I would have been so blinded by my need to get my career going, so worried about next month's mortgage, so concerned about paying off my visa bill, I would have tunneled focused on getting that booth set up, getting my cards passed out. I would not have even noticed the older couple behind me. You see, he was open to Spirit, and so opportunities came pouring to him. But for me, I would have worn myself out chasing them down. it came to ease to him. For me, it would have been exhaustion. There's a line in a Billie Holiday song. She says, for them that's got shall get, for them that's not shall lose. It's a takeoff on a biblical quote. Prosperity opens our eyes to what's available around us. Fear narrows our vision. Love expands it. If you want more good in your life, bless what you have. Bless what you have. Release what you no longer need. Give it back to the universe. There's somebody who can use it. When I walk through my neighborhood, I often look in at see people's garage, because I'm a rather nosy person, I'll admit that. And oftentimes I see them so packed up with stuff that if they even needed something in the middle of that, they wouldn't be able to get to it. It's already lost to them. They just haven't given it away. If they gave it away, it would open a channel for more blessings to come through. Not even God can bless us with clenched fist. Not even God. One of my favorite movies is called Harold and Maude. Harold is a young guy. He falls in love with Maude, who's much older. And there's a wonderful scene there at a fair. They're sitting in front of this big lake, and Harold gives Maude a little locket. And on the locket it says, Harold loves Maude. And Maude, she takes it, she clutches it. She says, oh, Harold, this is the sweetest, nicest gift anyone has given me in so long. And then she takes it, and as hard as she can, she throws it in the middle of the lake. She looks over into him and she says, now when I ever think of it, I'll always know where it's at. That's prosperity. Non-attachment. Abundance is about clinging. It's about trusting the flow. Catherine Ponder, she says, when you radiate outward, what you radiate outwards in your thoughts and your feelings and your mental pictures and words, she said, those come back. Gratitude radiates abundance. Resentment repels it. This is the story of Jesus and the fish. Jesus was preaching to a multitude. He had thousands of people in front of him. Nobody had thought about, well, how are we going to feed them? The first thing he did, he said, let's see what we have. And so they collected what they had, and it was fishes and loaves of bread. He immediately gave thanks to it. He didn't go through and said, I really wanted lamb. I was hoping for a hamburger. He didn't say, this one's too skinny, that one's too fat. He blessed what he had, and then it says he began to divide it. He began to work with it. And as he worked with it, it began to multiply. And it multiplied to the point that they had baskets left over. They were well supplied. What we bless, we multiply. When we curse, we shrink it. I've noticed people who, if you're driving a car you want to get rid of, take care of it as best you can. If you're in a job you don't really like, do the best job you can. Grow yourself out of a circumstance. Holmes says, we do not make the infinite give, we merely remove the blocks preventing the flow to come to us. So this Friday coming up, 6:30, we have our commitment dinner. Now, I don't teach tithing as a commandment, but I do believe in the spiritual law behind it. The universe, Holmes said, the universe holds nothing against us. It gives us to the extent we receive. Giving is what opens up channels of receiving. And it's not just about individual prosperity. It's about the flow of good through our whole community. When we give to the center, we're saying yes to that part of divine circulation. to music that uplifts, inspires, to classes to awakening, to our community out in the world doing good, helping families in need, scholarships to kids with disabilities, going to the nursing homes. We are holding a vision for ourselves, for each other in this community that is important and necessary at this time. We are a beacon, just like that lighthouse on the shore. We are a beacon sending out signals of hope and encouragement and inspirations. We're not looking for blessings to spirits. We are becoming the blessings from spirit. And I heard a teacher say you're never going to outgive spirit, no matter how much you give. And so how much do we give? Well, we give enough so that our consciousness recognizes the importance, not out of guilt and shame, but with joy, knowing that we are so blessed that we can't help but support others. When we give, we expand our capacity to receive. Catherine Ponder, she says, the law of prosperity is generous giving and gracious receiving. That's the law we live with. Give what you can with joy, receive what comes with gratitude. And that trust that Spirit multiplies every gift in ways that will bless you way more than you can see. Dr. Holmes, he says, we're surrounded by a spirit of intelligence that responds to us definitely and directly. So let us respond in kind, with faith, with gratitude, with compassion and generosity. Let us decide right here, right now, to live courageously, to cast aside shackles of fear, of doubt, of worry, and limitations. Let's lift our eyes up and see a beloved community, one that we're going to work toward and put in place to live from the outflow of Spirit within us, to bless the world from our love and goodness, to become the blessings that Spirit has created us to be. We can do it. Now's our time, and this is our opportunity. This is the truth in your life this morning. It's the truth in mine, and so it is. Thank you. Thank you.